and welcome everyone to our fourth webinar for the series. We'll start just in a few moments, I think. There's lots of people coming in now. I'll just wait a couple more seconds, I think. I'm just keeping an eye on those participant numbers. They're still going up, which is lovely, but I think we're kind of plateauing a bit now. So I think we will get started. Thank you, Emily. Welcome to our webinar. Today's webinar is on the very exciting and relevant topic of livability. I've just got to be careful not to cover up my microphone. I'm Kim Horton. I'm the Chief Economist and currently Acting CEO of the Regional Australian Institute. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land where I'm broadcasting from today, the Ngunnawal people, and pay my respects to their elders past and present and emerging. I'd like to welcome any other First Nations people joining us today too. Today's our fourth Regions Rising webinar for our 21-22 series, sponsored by Nutrient Ag Solutions and NBN Co. Today we're getting into livability. We have a wonderful panel of mayors from regional councils from the top to bottom of Australia. I'm particularly pleased by that. All places that are experiencing high rates of population growth. And importantly, we'll also be hearing from Nutrient Ag Solutions, one of the region's biggest employers, to explore what their staff look for in taking up a regional job. I'll just introduce our four guests today really quickly. Councillor Katrina Humphries, until very recently Mayor of Moree Plains Shire Council. Thank you for joining us, Katrina. Councillor Libby Stapleton, Mayor of Surf Coast Shire Council. Morning, Libby. Councillor Michael Kerr, Mayor of Douglas Shire Council in the far north of the country. Thanks, Michael. And Shelley Nolan, Senior Director of Human Resources for Nutrient Ag Solutions. I'll introduce them separately in a few moments and tell you a bit more about where they're coming from, and we'll hear from them in a few moments. You've probably seen their bios that were shared on social media platforms through the week. The bios are also available on our website where you registered for the webinar. The session is being recorded and we'll make it available on our YouTube channel along with any slides from our presenters. Media is also on the line today as well. Also, remember to get vocal on social media using the hashtag RegionsRising, and you can tag us on Twitter at RegionalAus, that's Regional AUS. Before we get into it, I really would like to acknowledge our sponsors for the series, NBN Co and Nutrient Ag Solutions. Without them, we wouldn't be able to continue delivering these free webinars, as well as the in-person conferences, from the National Summit that we had back in March to the upcoming regional conferences, also part of the Regions Rising series, which will take place across regional Australia over the next 2 years. So thank you very much, NBN and Nutrient, for your continued support and your commitment to regional communities. We've got an hour today, so I want to make the most of it. We'll have time for Q&A after our guests speak. You can submit your questions at any time throughout the session using the Q&A function in Zoom. Make sure to note your organisation, where you're from, and who you're directing your question to, if anyone. If your question is chosen, my team will enable your microphone so you can ask your question personally. We have received some questions in advance, so I hope you'll see you'll be able to spot some of the answers to those questions woven into the discussion today. Now it's time to take a closer look at livability. It's, to be honest, a slippery concept. RAI work in 2018 and 2019 found that it not only varies from person to person, but it also varies within a person across their different life stages. We can see this in some of the movement patterns around regional Australia. Many young people from regions move to the city. Around a third of those will return to the regions long term, while other young people prefer moving to other regional locations. There are very distinct patterns, different patterns from the same groups of people. Most regions see steady flows of early career people in and out, and most coastal regions have people over 55 as the largest group of inflows. So people are voting with their feet. They're telling us what they're interested in through those different life stages, through the patterns that they weave as they move around the country. And certainly over the last 2 years, we've seen some wild swings in the places people from cities are choosing to go to. The Regional Movers Index that we do each quarter with the Commonwealth Bank showed the surge in movement to regional Victoria this year. It also picked Douglas Shire as one of the emerging hotspot destinations for city folks. And last quarter highlighted the big jump in movement into Moree Plains. Douglas Shire was also one of the most searched councils when we launched the Move to More campaign late last year. The website supports our campaign to promote the benefits of regional living to people living in our biggest capital cities. And it's great to see the early interest in Douglas Shire on the web traffic actually translated into actual relocations. Livability is also one of the 6 pillars of the RAI's regionalisation framework, our approach to setting a national agenda to help regions flourish. Our research indicates that there are some common elements to livability, though they're not always easy to monitor. Foundation aspects include things like connectivity, transport, telecommunications connectivity, utilities, in particular water in many parts of regional Australia, and adequate community infrastructure. But beyond those foundations, there are some common elements. These include health services, education services, the cost of living, cost of housing being part of that, amenity, again, a rather sort of slippery concept to capture, but it's clearly a part of one of the package of things that people look for. Connection to community, about how your relationship with this particular place is embedded in your own community of friends and colleagues. And lifestyle and opportunity, which to us is a mix about jobs, but not just jobs, it's about job prospects for yourself, your partner and your kids if you have them. The Institute has prepared a Livability toolkit, which is available on our website. This toolkit steps through a simple process to help regional leaders map out their region's livability strengths and then tailor the message about what's great about their place. I think this morning we'll be hearing a lot more about how livability is playing a role in enabling and encouraging people to take up a regional job or move to a regional location for other reasons. First up, I'd like to welcome Shelley Nolan, who will share Nutrient Ag Solutions' outlook on the role of livability in attracting people to work in jobs in regional and rural Australia. With over 20 years in human resources, Shelley brings extensive HR and leadership experience gained predominantly in the food manufacturing and fast-moving consumer goods sectors. Shelley has experience working on large integration projects and culture transformation programs with particular experience building and developing best practice people processes. Shelley is passionate about creating a workplace where employees can be at their best and believes culture, diversity and leadership are the essential building blocks. Over to you, Shelley.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks very much for that introduction. I'll just share my screen. So, look, many thanks for the opportunity to speak today. Nutrient Ag Solutions is a really passionate supporter of the Regional Australian Institute and the work that it's actually doing to advocate for our regional communities. As you mentioned, Kim, I have the great privilege of leading the human resources function for Nutrient Ag Solutions here in Australia. And our business is the leading agricultural retailer in Australia. We have approximately 4,000 employees working across more than 340 retail branches right across regional Australia. And I just wanted here to really just, show you really where we're located. So as you can see, we have great presence right across Australia in over 700 locations, and you can see a very heavy representation across the eastern seaboard. I guess due to the breadth of our business, we do actually employ a whole range of skill sets and capabilities in ag, and that really is from ag scientists to chemists, truck drivers, data analysts, salespeople, livestock agents, water brokers. We have web developers, real estate agents, insurance brokers. We have a range of professionals, all supported really ably by our really highly skilled safety professionals. So we do have a lot of opportunity as we go to market, and as you can imagine, with such a diverse and large workforce, obviously regional and rural locations are of a great interest to the people that join our business. At any one time, we actually have approximately 120 roles open, and right now we have that amount of roles open at the moment. And actually of that, we have 91% or 90% of those roles are actually based in what we call our network. So all our locations that are based out of our regional cities. And I guess when you look across our business and look at the information here, what I wanted to do was really just present you with a high level snapshot of where our employees are located from a state perspective, and also to just looking at our gender. We're really very focused on gender diversity in our business, and pleasingly this year we've recruited nearly 800 people into the business, and it's nearly a 50-50% split, which is fabulous. And really, when you look at our recruitment, our recruitment or my recruitment team are really the ambassadors, the unofficial ambassadors actually for the towns of regional Australia, as they talk to candidates for the roles that we've advertised in every corner of the country. And some of those locations are far easier to recruit for. Unsurprisingly and really, interestingly, as you pointed out, Kim, what's really important to people is obviously, that they've got a choice of schools, hospital, recreational facilities, and even things like, pubs, cafes, community sports are really seen as very desirable by our candidates. Housing options obviously is also a key consideration as well for people moving to remote, or regional towns. And this slide here really just talks to where we have actually recruited this year, in what parts of Australia. And we've actually recruited nearly 70% of our roles have actually been based in regional Australia. And then we'll break down, we've got 30% we're in what we call our southeast region. So that's Victoria, South Australia and Tasmania. Our northeast region, as you can see there, Northern Territory, Queensland and New South Wales, has accounted for almost 30% of our new hires. And really what we find is that there are certain roles that we would say that are quite difficult to fill in some of the roles and locations, and they're out there. So our agronomists, branch managers, people that actually support our retail network, merchandise managers. And then also too, we have some difficulty in some of those real estate roles and property managers across South Australia, Tasmania and Victoria. And look, if we think about the locations for us, some of the detractors and some of the challenges we find from a recruitment perspective really are locations that have a poor reputation from a crime perspective. We actually, whether or not that that reputation is warranted or not, what we find is obviously it's much more difficult to recruit in those locations, as potential candidates do a lot of research and there's a lot of information that they can gain on the internet to research an area. We find remote states like Queensland have proven difficult in attracting young single people, and really the size of those towns and I guess the population and proximity then to larger towns is also certainly a consideration and something that we actually talk to candidates a lot about. However, if we look at a place like Ayr, which is obviously in far north Queensland, it attracts applicants because even though it's a small area and it's reasonably remote, it's actually not too far, not too far away from the larger regional hub of Townsville. So again, as some of those recruitment challenges, obviously accessibility to schooling and higher education, perceived lack of career progression or limited career opportunities, and that is often very difficult. Housing affordability and access to rentals are limited. So we had a role recently in southern Western Australia, and I think the town that we were recruiting for had 3 houses in it, which is obviously a very extreme example, but certainly that becomes very difficult when we actually are trying to source homes for potential candidates. Health service is obviously critical. Obviously, recreation, families. And I think what you mentioned earlier, that real connection to community is very important. People want to feel like they can be part of the community and connect, and that's really important. So things like recreation activities, sporting clubs are very important. And obviously, as I said earlier, some of the more, I guess the detractors are some of those things that we talked about that are portrayed by the media. And what we're finding now is in areas where there's mining organisations, we're really competing to attract talent there. But I think the thing that actually stands out that is really, when we look at our recruitment data, the thing that actually that is almost on every candidate's mind, whether they're from a city or a regional area, is that they've actually typically had some experience in regional locations. So some have grandparents or have previously lived on a farm and looking to return. And so I guess for us, what that means is we need to actually start being a lot more present in secondary school and starting to talk about the organisation and the agricultural industry more broadly in secondary school situations, because obviously they're the potential candidates of the future in 5 to 10 years' time. But look, I'm really looking forward to the panel discussion, and I'm really happy to take any questions. Thanks, Kim.
That's great. Thanks, Libby. That was really interesting. I think your points about connection are really well made. We know that, and your point, I think, a lot of us get used to sort of trying to work out how to pitch our places to an outside audience. I think what you're telling us is what that outside audience is actually looking for, and that doesn't always exactly line up with what we think our regional strengths are. So it's really good to have that perspective. And I like that idea about people having some sort of previous connection somehow with the place as being, if not from that particular regional place, then from another regional place, because that in a way stops us trying to pitch entirely to a city audience. And it says, well, actually, to be honest, a lot of the people that are going to be coming to our places are likely to have some broad understanding of the area already, in which case the message is slightly different. So I've got loads of questions for you, and I'm sure that listeners will too. So thanks very much for that. We'll look forward to coming back to them as part of the panel. I'd now like to introduce the rest of the panel. I'll briefly introduce each person one at a time and invite them to make a few opening introductory remarks. First up, Katrina Humphries. Katrina was born in Moree and is the fourth generation of her family on the Black Soil Plains. For the past 22 years, she's been the owner-operator of Fish About Moree. Councillor Humphries has successfully provided leadership through 3 major floods during 2011-2012 and stood beside farmers, graziers and townspeople during the droughts. She has taken on the ratings agencies and international banks in relation to loss of council investments through the global financial crisis, and she won, much to the benefit of her community. Councillor Humphries held the mayoral position for Moree Plains from 2008 until just about 10 days ago in early December 2021. Thank you, Katrina, for joining us this morning.
Oh, good morning, Kim, and good morning to all listeners. It's a pleasure to be here as the former mayor, and I've got to get used to that now. It's sort of 20% of my life. But and welcome to all our viewers and listeners. Welcome into my space of the Moree Plains Shire. But it's not just about Moree and the Moree Plains Shire. It's about our region. But particularly the Moree Plains Shire is the most agriculturally productive shire in Australia, and we're immensely proud of that. We are very innovative. Our farmers are often engaged through big companies to trial new machinery, to new practices and all that sort of thing. So we're very adaptive. We have to deal with floods and fires and famines and more floods and more droughts. The drought has taken a huge toll, but we're all still here, and we're all immensely proud of our community. On a livability scale, the Moree Plains Shire has a lot to offer. We have a direct air service route that we're very passionate about protecting. From Moree, with direct flight from Moree to Sydney, it takes about an hour and 20 minutes. In good times, when there's no border rubbish going on, we are only a 5-hour drive to Brisbane and the Gold Coast, which makes for a great weekend. But even closer to places, beautiful places like Yamba and Coffs Harbour, and there's places to go up into the mountains. You can go out west to places like Lightning Ridge, where there's lots of interesting people. We have schools. We have university access, which is hugely important because not everybody that comes from a rural area wants to move to the city to go to uni. And sadly, not everyone can afford it. So it's a terrible thing for kids to not pursue their dreams of university education if they simply can't afford it. And that's not what Australia is about. We're an amazing country. We have a great lifestyle out here. We call it our rural sophistication. We have huge amount of coffee shops, have fabulous restaurants. We have an amazing golf course, beautiful 18-hole golf course with proper greens, and people can go and play after work. For the young couples with children, the opportunity abounds to be able to take your kids to sport on a Saturday morning, to leave home 15 minutes before kickoff and to actually get a park and be there. You're not in traffic for 2 or 3 hours, and that we find that is also a great benefit that people often don't talk about. Our housing affordability is fair. We also have a housing project out there now in the marketplace. We need 600 new homes over the next 5 years to fit in with our inland rail work that has been largely the catalyst in our population rise, but also our special activation precinct that is all but ticked off. We're just waiting for the final announcement on it, and the team that have worked on that have been absolutely amazing. And the opportunity that opens to a vast array of agriculturally associated businesses, but also with all the population increase that we're having, every other industry is needing. We need more teachers, we need more accountants, we need more solicitors, we need more people to work in our hospitality industry. So we need more working staff. We definitely need more doctors. So we're also getting a new hospital, a new $80 million hospital has been promised, and it's in the state budget. and that'll probably commence next year sometime, which is very exciting because everybody wants to work somewhere that's lovely and big and shiny and bright. Our climate, we do have a hot period, and we do have, it gets hot in Moree, and there's no hiding it, but we have remarkable air conditioning all through the place. But our winters are just beautiful because you still get your clothes dry. So, we sort of average about 16-degree winter day, and we do get some frosts and things like that, but it's a great climate, and our black soil is so productive that we're immensely proud of what we grow. We grow the wheat that puts the bread on the supermarket shelves. We grow the durum that gets exported to Italy to come back as beautiful quality pasta. And really importantly, we grow the barley that makes the beer. So we feel we have a very special place in the heart of many. But we also have wonderful olives. We grow pecan nuts. We've got the biggest pecan nut farm in the Southern Hemisphere. We have other associated grains. We have faba beans. We export chickpeas to India. We have sunflowers, canola, and we're very proud of what we grow, but we also have a huge tourist industry because we're blessed to have water. And our water is our lifeblood. Our sub-artesian and our artesian water, we swim in it, we drink it, we irrigate with it, and we've been blessed. I don't gloat on it, but it is a fact. We don't have water restrictions in our community, even through drought. And we were able to, at the height of the drought, rather than have firework night on New Year's Eve, we said, let's give all our rural people and anyone that isn't attached to town water 75,000 litres of water for their rainwater tanks to top up. So that's how we operate. So we're very diverse. We have about 47 different nationalities in Moree, and some are like myself, fourth generational. They came here as merchants and tradesmen, and they're part of our huge community. But we also have, in recent years, a lot of South African and Zimbabwean farmers, because our farming practices are very similar. So we have a very rich culture, and we're immensely proud, and we're very welcoming. We're very, very welcoming community. We love to see people come and have a look, and we say, if you think you'd like to move here and you see opportunities abound, come and see us, come and stay for a bit, come and experience the relaxed lifestyle that we have most of the time. And it's a great place, and we're very proud of it.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Katrina. The Moree Plains was, of course, one of the, on our regional movers index, one of the place that was top of the list, actually, for percentage growth in people coming from cities to Moree Plains over the previous 12 months. So lots of people are clearly identifying these capacities and attractions that you've been talking about, Katrina. So thank you, and we look forward to hearing a little bit more of that through the discussion. Unpack some of those issues. I like the point you're making about the population growth's been welcome and good, but it does then create a sort of a flow on demand for other people in work and other occupations to help service that increasing population. And I'm sure that's something we'll come back to. Thank you. I'd like to turn now to Libby Stapleton. Libby is an active member of the Surf Coast Shire community, having lived in Aries Inlet for the past 18 years, raising a young family and integrating herself in the fabric of local life. Her professional training is in public relations as well as outdoor education, bringing a strong mix of relevant skills to her role as counsellor. She runs her own communications business and enjoys engaging directly with the local community in her roles as editor of News Angle and operator of the Aries Inlet Market. Libby, can you give us a bit of background on Surf Coast and how it's been changing over the last little while?
Thanks, Kim, and thanks to the Regional Australia Institute for having me here today. It was actually your research, Kim, that recognised Surf Coast as being one of the top 5 creative and innovative hotspots in Australia, and that influenced the direction of our recently developed economic strategy. So I'm really pleased to be here with you all today. I'm just going to share a couple of slides to provide some context about the Surf Coast. So if you bear with me for a second while I get those up. And find my little cursor. Is that all looking okay from your end? Great. So I will start by acknowledging that the Wadawurrung people and the Gudubanud and Gulajan people of the Eastern Maar are the traditional custodians of the land that we now call Surf Coast Shire. And as Kim mentioned, I'm coming to you today from Aries Inlet, which was traditionally known as Mangawak, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So to give everyone some context about Surf Coast, we're about an hour and a half's drive from Melbourne and about 30 minutes from Geelong, which is the largest regional centre in Victoria. So here on the Surf Coast, you'll see it's sort of sandwiched in there next to the Great Ocean Road Circle and the Geelong Circle. We have about sort of 35,000 residents, but this can triple during peak holiday seasons. So we have a fast rate of growth, but you'll see from that slide, we also have a lot of growth around us, which is one of the big things that we need to consider and factor in over the coming years. So Melbourne's predicted to grow. The outskirts of Melbourne is growing really rapidly. Geelong is growing rapidly, and the Great Ocean Road continues to attract a significant number of visitors. So the Surf Coast in itself is a large centre of growth, but we also need to consider the massive amounts of growth that are happening around us. You'll see Torquay is actually at the start of the Great Ocean Road, and the Great Ocean Road attracts around sort of 7 million visitors a year. So with our permanent population at 35,000, we really need to cater for not just those permanents, but all those millions of visitors that enjoy this beautiful part of the world. And as you can see on the slide behind me, it really is a magnificent coastal, and you can't see the hinterland, but hinterland community as well. So we've got a nice balance. Lorne's population, I mean, a lot of people have heard of Lorne on the Great Ocean Road. It's a small permanent community with around 1,000 residents. But that number can swell to about 15,000 overnight visitors during peak times. We can have another 15,000 day trippers on top of that. In January, you get sort of major events like the Pier to Pub swim. So you've got a really small town trying to cater for 30,000 people on a hot January day, which has its challenges. And, you know, because of the growth around us and because of those large populations around us, more than half of our visitors are actually day trippers, and mostly sort of from Melbourne and the outskirts of Melbourne. So we know that those day trippers will only increase, and that growth tends to kind of bring high visitation and low spend, which is probably the opposite of what we'd like to see. So, you know, we are a region with strong tourism, but we recognise that it comes with its challenges. On this slide, as I mentioned, we do have a new economic development strategy, which is all about helping us to grow sustainably. It's part of our story. If anyone's interested, they can have a look on the Surf Coast Shire Council website. But for people who know the region, our economic roots were largely surfing and tourism, but this has evolved a lot in recent years to include events, entrepreneurs, creatives, as I mentioned earlier on, with recognised as one of the top 5 creative hotspots in Victoria now. And we're looking for ways, I guess, to help diversify our economy and reduce that reliance on tourism. We know that small businesses make up about 90% of all Surf Coast businesses, and the pandemic has had a huge influence on the types of jobs that people sort of look to in the Surf Coast. So we're seeing a transition in those industries to a real shift towards knowledge workers' jobs. So people have been able to move out of the office and into the virtual world. And that's rapidly fueling movement to our part of the world that was probably happening anyway, but it's just exacerbated the rate of that change. So people can work from anywhere. They can choose a place that supports their lifestyle, and Surf Coast obviously offers a lot of that still within only, you know, an hour and a half commute of Melbourne. The professionals that we are seeing moving to the Surf Coast, our understanding, and quite rightly, is that they've been inspired by the lifestyle that Surf Coast offers. We're surrounded by a beautiful natural environment, and people recognise that they can sort of work from home, turn their passion into a business. And you'll see from that slide, all those coloured dots are home-based businesses, and that's just in Torquay and Jan Juc, so it doesn't even cover the whole of the Surf Coast, but there's an estimated 8,400 home-based businesses in the Surf Coast. So we're seeing a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people setting up their own businesses from home. And in Torquay and Jan Juc alone, there's been a 312% growth in this type of business. So that's about 4,000 additional home-based businesses. But interestingly, we've seen a greater increase in percentage of home-based businesses in the hinterland than on the coast. What we know about these people is that they're highly educated. I believe the Surf Coast has the highest level of qualifications per capita in the state, so that's higher than Melbourne and Geelong. They're leaving the corporate world to create their own creative and entrepreneurial businesses, or in some cases they're fortunate enough to have work where they can, work 50-70% of their time from home down on the coast and commute up to Melbourne, 1 or 2 days a week if needed. And I think Michael has mentioned in the past that Douglas is getting all the CEOs. Well, we believe we're getting all the creatives and entrepreneurs. So it's it balances out across regional Victoria and regional Australia. There's plenty of opportunity for people to find beautiful parts of regional Australia to live and work from. That's probably enough from me for now, but thank you for giving me that opportunity just to introduce our beautiful part of the world.
That's terrific. Thanks, Libby. And it's amazing how much growth you've seen and how much change that's bringing to the community. So I think we'll dig into that a bit more in a little while. Next up, Michael Kerr. Michael moved to Douglas Shire 20 years ago with a background in small business management. He took the reins of a local theatre company, effectively saving the heritage building and operating a not-for-profit entity for the community to enjoy, the Clink Theatre. Seeking to further contribute to important community issues, he entered the political world in 2016, successfully running as a councillor candidate. In 2020, he was then successful in running for the Mayor of Douglas Shire. He's also chair of Far North Queensland Regional Organisation of Councils, an added challenge which he enjoys immensely. Over to you, Michael. Can you tell us a bit more about what's going on in Douglas Shire?
Thank you, and thank you very much for inviting us to be here today. I also would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in which we're in, which up here we've got the Guugu-Yalangji and the Irukandji people, and pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging, and any other Indigenous people that may be watching today. We've gone through one big transition over the last couple of years. Just as I was coming into being mayor in 2020, we were looking at doing an economical development strategy to try and increase our population and increase business diversity. And we never expected what would happen from COVID, which has completely changed us. So Douglas is 70 kilometres north of Cairns. There's one road that takes from Cairns up to here. Of course, Cairns is our major airport, and that's the Great Barrier Reef Drive, which is a stunning drive just to start your journey to Douglas. It's a beautiful road, because tourism is our main thing up here. Tourism, we've got 1,377 small local businesses, which are basically tourism, generating millions of dollars a year for this region and supporting 2,500 jobs up here. Our other industry, of course, is cane. We've got very diverse sections up here, from Port Douglas being very tourism orientated to Mossman being very cane farmer orientated. So very, very, very different demographics. And even within each of the regions like Port Douglas and Mossman, you have very different demographics there as well, from people that have been there from the early 80s before Skase days, to people that have moved there to make their money, to the people that are living there now for the lifestyle that it creates. So we've got, as I said, very diverse population. There's about 12,000 people in our shire, which covers a very big area. That is a very low rate base, though, considering we have millions of tourists come through every year, and we need infrastructure to of course cope with them. Tourism, as I said, is one of the big things up here. You need to be able to compete in the tourism market, and having a small rate base is always very difficult in that respect. Like has been mentioned, we have a great shortage in qualified staff up here. It's something that we've certainly noticed as far as doctors and professional people up here. That's a big shortage, but the influx of people we've had during COVID has been phenomenal. We've found that the younger ones that would normally move to the city areas haven't. They've stayed local. And we've had a lot of people from the city areas thinking, where have we been that's been safe and enjoyable to be? Port Douglas, there's houses there for sale. I think in 2020, we had nearly 20% of our residential properties on the market. Between COVID and now, we've turned over 10% of those residential properties, most of them sight unseen and paying top dollar for it. Now, that has been great as far as if you're a real estate agent, but it's certainly taken a lot of the properties that would normally house our employees off the market. So when we had that big influx of tourism last year for that couple month period there, we had a lot of difficulty for trying to find housing for the staff. We pushed very hard to get what staff we could up here, and when we did, we couldn't house them, and a lot of them ended up leaving. So that's created a big burden in itself. We've also got a lot of environmental protection things up here. We're sitting between the two world heritages. We've got the Great Barrier Reef, we've got the Daintree Rainforest. So there's a lot of work within the community and council resources that goes into the protection of those two bodies. Like most councils, we have a very aging infrastructure. We believe it or not, as I said to people, we don't have a water shortage up here. We have a water storage shortage problem. So we don't have anywhere to store the water that we require. Currently in Douglas, we draw from a river system. And of course, during the September to December periods is when that drops to its lowest. And of course, that's when we have the most tourists in town. So, we're using far more water during that period. We don't have enough water to supply. So we're on water restrictions every year because of that. So we're constantly working on infrastructure to try and get that water up so that we can increase residential properties. It's silly changing our planning scheme to put a lot more residential areas in when we don't have the water to supply them at this point. So we're working on that. We have a lot of issues with our road structures. Just in this region, the far north Queensland region, there's $600 million worth of backlog in roadworks. So then that's from Cairns all the way up to the Cape within the F&Q Rock region. So there's things like that also need to be considered when you're increasing your population, which is naturally happening. And we know that more and more people are moving from the urban areas to the rural areas, and we need to be catering for that as we keep moving forward. It's a frustrating time we're going for. It's something we wanted to get more people up here. We desperately need more people up here to grow our rate base. But I don't think we wanted it in such a drastic, quick influx. It's causing its own set of problems for doing so. So I'm very interested in hearing what the other areas are thinking, what they're doing, and the way people are looking at these issues of the change of population growth in different areas. And as you mentioned, the data that came out from yourselves showed that Port Douglas and Douglas was one of the most populous places to move to, and they've certainly moved here. And as Libby mentioned, it's the CEOs we're told that have moved here. There's been so many people who said, I was on a conference call the other day with my CEO. He's in Port Douglas. So obviously it's a great place to sit and work if you can work from home, and a lot of people are. So that's about it from me. So looking forward to hearing what others have got to say.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Big challenges, and really nice the way you've portrayed those growing pains, really. So others have mentioned them too. You need to, as the population grows, there's a need for other services to grow as well. But some of that infrastructure gets strained. And I think personally, when the Institute was looking at these population changes, the change in patterns over the last couple of years, it seems that most of our state governments have sort of underestimated, I think, the population growth for a lot of our regional places. And that has implications, because those population projections are a really important part of funding that sort of underlying infrastructure. And I think we've seen a bit of an acceleration away from those previous estimates, and now we've got a new rate of growth. So we're going to turn it over to panel questions. We've got a few lining up, which is great, and I'll come to one in a minute. But I just wanted to take my sort of facilitator's privilege first and ask Shelley a question. Because we've all been talking a little bit about the need to keep sort of skilled workers in as part of this sort of growth process. Shelley, is there anything you'd recommend that a regional community do to ensure it's more attractive to workers and residents? Have you got any advice for local leaders about what they need to cover off and what they need to sort of base their their spruiking about their place on that would make a difference to people like your staff?
I think most of it's been covered. So probably really, Kim, in summary, is I think housing is really important, and infrastructure, and I think the ability for families or for people to connect to the community. So for us, I think one of the biggest things is housing, absolutely housing, and then infrastructure. I think infrastructure is is really critical.
And the housing one's tricky, isn't it? Because it's if there isn't any housing, then it's hard to bring new people in, and then that sort of further constrains the growth. So I think a number of you commented on that. Now we've got, I'd like to invite a question from a participant, Jodie Fleming. I think you had a question about how various regions are addressing some of the perceptional difficulties that might be affecting them in terms of their attractiveness. Would you like to ask that question to the panel?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kim. So I'm Jodie Fleming from the Committee for Greater Shepparton. I'm interested to know, like, some of the barriers for people relocating regionally. You've just touched on the housing affordability, or just housing in general, but also the negative views portrayed by the media in terms of crime, which we have a little bit of an issue with that in Shepparton, and it's not quite correct. You know, like everywhere else have issues, but really like to know what sort of things are other people doing, or that you know of, that, you know, to solve some of these problems?
Yeah, do any of our panelists have some views on that?
Yeah, look, absolutely. Katrina here from Moree Plains Shire. Jodie, we too suffer the same media barrage at times. And yes, we do have an issue, as it does every other community has an issue with ICE. They have an issue with crime. You wouldn't leave your motel door unlocked in the city. You don't leave it unlocked in the rural areas. But I think it's really important that we talk about our problems. There's no point in trying to sweep them under the carpet. And I think it's also incredibly important to bring organisations to account. And I believe that there's a huge number of organisations and NGOs out there that have paid a lot of money to make sure that our young people, and it is predominantly youth crime that we deal with, are cared for and are nurtured and are educated. And if those communities, organisations and government organisations aren't towing the line, then they need to be made accountable. And I'm old school, I'm hard, and I believe that people are paid to do a job, and they need to do it. And I think there's also a huge importance in acknowledging problems, and it may be like Michael just acknowledged, they have water problems. You know, we've acknowledged we've got housing problems, and I think it's hugely important to acknowledge your problems and really put some pressure on the people that are paid enormously to fulfil a role, that they actually get out of the office. Beat police are hugely important, you know, the presence of people out there, but you cannot do this from behind a computer screen.
Any others had issues with perceptions that have had to be addressed? Michael, is it an issue for you about being isolated and right at the tip of the country, and some people, obviously some people really like it as well?
Yeah, I was just thinking about it while you're talking about, we don't have a high level of crime as such. You know, we're very lucky in that respect. Cairns is a different story. Cairns is going through a spat at the moment where the media is hammering them. As the media does, they always choose one particular topic and they run with it for a while until it becomes boring. Then they go to the next one. Yeah, so crime is one that's being pushed at the moment down there. Yeah, for us, it's more that isolation again of a dance party in the Daintree, for example. You know, we've had incidences where, you know, a dance party at Cape Tribulation's gone on for 2 days and we haven't had a police officer to get there, you know, because unfortunately, and it's certainly not the police's fault, it's their budgets. There's only 2 police officers that cover this whole region, you know, Mossman and Port Douglas. And if they go to the Daintree, it means the whole area has no police coverage at all, unless someone comes up from Cairns, which is at least an hour away. If they're in this region and they arrest someone, they have to stay at the station. They can't even leave the station. So again, there's no police out on the streets. And the only other option is to drive them down to Cairns, which means 3 or 4 hours again. So there's great issues with the police here in this respect. They do what they can to control situations. And of course, if there's obvious blatant ones, they have to do it, but they try to resolve situations as much as possible. And, you know, I don't think it's going to change until, you know, there's a serious change in the side of, as far as budgets goes for policing. And, you know, it's the old adage again, like Katrina, I'm old school, you know, a lot of this stuff starts at home when they're little in the first place. If they're not getting taught respect at home, they're not going to respect anyone else. I mean, my generation, you saw a police officer and you respected them. You wouldn't dare speak to them like a lot of the kids do these days.
Thanks, Michael. Libby, are there other sort of social pressures that are emerging with the growth that you're seeing? And it's spread across the Shire, isn't it? In different areas too.
Thanks, Kim. Look, I would say that our biggest challenge in terms of growth pressures would be access to affordable accommodation. And I know that's something that everybody's mentioned and struggling with, but it is quite significant for us, particularly in some of those coastal communities where they rely, I guess, on key workers to keep businesses open. And our council actually just recently changed our local laws to allow for camping, increased from 28 days up to 120 days. So just really for that peak summer period, it gives businesses and workers that option to actually either stay in a caravan or a tent for, up to 4 adults for 4 days, just to help. It's obviously not a long-term solution, but as far as actually enabling our businesses and key workers to live and work on the coast over summer, that's a solution that we've looked to. I just think more broadly, the affordability or lack of affordability on the coast is a real challenge for our communities. It's changing, I guess, the diversity of our population. I live in Aireys Inlet, and I think the median house price here is now about $1.7 million. So we're really keen to see the hinterland grow. Winchelsea is a gorgeous regional township in the Surf Coast that currently has a population of about 2,000, but has, capacity for growth up to about 10,000 people. That's, within a short commute to Geelong. It's got a growing community and much more affordable accommodation. So I guess for people sort of aspiring to that Surf Coast lifestyle, that's the best option for them. But in terms of keeping those coastal communities sustainable, that's probably our real challenge.
Yeah, thanks, Libby. Well, I just want to build on that housing. We've got a lot of questions in the chat and in the Q&A about housing, and you just mentioned there a sort of interesting local response around extending that permission to stay in caravan parks. Andrew Kelso, you had a question on that topic. Would you like to put that to the panel?
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, thanks for your time, everyone, and appreciate the invite. And I'm from ABC Horsham, and it's interesting just hearing you all talk about the housing issue, because that is by far, echoing what we're having here in terms of housing, preventing employment, preventing people able to get up here. And there are so many job vacancies, but ultimately when people try and come, the last hurdle that they can't get over is being able to find housing. But one thing that's sort of always curious to hear if anyone has any like unorthodox or unusual solutions that they found for it, because there's a lot of grassroots projects that seem to be going on. And I think, Michael, you mentioned that you sort of tried to encourage people to come up during the tourist season. I just wonder if any particularly the councillors knew of any sort of local projects they tried that actually made a difference to housing.
Can I jump in on that one, Kim? Yeah. So in addition to the local law, and Kim, just to clarify, that's not just for caravan parks, that's actually people, private properties. Okay. So people can have a caravan or people camping on their properties for up to 120 days. Mm-hmm. But down in Lawn, we're also trialling, so we declared a key worker accommodation crisis on the Surf Coast back in May, which I guess provided us with the rationale to actually go in and trial some different strategies. And the Lawn community in particular has been working really hard to resolve this. And what they've started is an adopt a worker program. So they've actually done a really strong push in the local community. If you've got a spare room or a bungalow or anything where you can accommodate a worker, you're supported to do that. So I think that's getting a lot of interest. The proof will be over sort of the Christmas, January period as to how effective that's been. But if that works, that's for our community, that'd be a really significant outcome.
Thanks, Libby. Michael and Katrina, you both mentioned sort of similar issues. Are you trialling experimenting with some different approaches to try to fast track some of that housing need?
Yes, Kim, Katrina here. Yes, we are. We have quite a few projects underway at the moment, particularly where the builders are using a lot of our local younger Indigenous kids and teaching them how to tile, how to be electricians, how to lay bricks, how to build. And I think that's hugely important. But I go a bit further with the housing crisis. Nothing new about the housing crisis. Been a crisis going on for a long while. And I actually think that the state governments need to confer and work with the locals. And we had a $24 million project in Moree Plains probably about 10 years ago. We, the council, were excluded from any input into the design, into the building quality, the laying of cement. We have this amazing black soil where we can grow anything, but it is a builder's nightmare if you don't know what you're doing. Now, we were excluded from advice on you know, how thick the cement needed to be and everything. And within 4 or 5 years, the $24 million project for 56 housing units had to be rebuilt for another cost of 28 million. Now that's just stupidity. Yeah, if they'd conferred with the locals, we would have told them exactly what needed to be done, but they wouldn't. So you get these people in these departments very often that are pig-headed. There's no other way to describe it, and they're not practical. The best people to know about the best sort of housing for communities are the locals. Now, we also have quite a bit of community housing and public housing in our community, and I believe firmly that most of the residents are long-term and they respect and look after the buildings they have. However, some are not. So if you can't look after the house that you are given at a cheaper rent and things like that, then you shouldn't have it. You shouldn't get another shot at it. And there it seems to be a lack of willingness for people to take a firm stand. And what's been happening here quite a bit is that people are really, really making a mess of their public housing. And then they're put into a motel for 3 or 4 weeks while the house is rebuilt again, and then they go back into it. So there should not be reward for bad behaviour, for starters. And I think we'd have a lot better housing for a lot more people if the people that chose to denigrate their surrounds were not rewarded. So I think there's a lot that should be done, but I think it has to start with the local communities and the local councils and the local land councils and everybody else being able to really have some solid and practical input. Like these places that were built here 10 years ago, Moree gets hot. I told you that before. They didn't put air conditioning in them. Yeah, just crazy stuff. So yeah, that's just one example. But I think local input is hugely important.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Katrina. I think that's a principle we firmly endorse at the Institute. Michael, have you had to sort of really look outside the box in terms of finding sort of particularly you mentioned the difficulties in having hospitality workers. What's happening?
Well, we're stuck every time we turn a corner. We've got a planning scheme that is very tight as far as its environmental concerns go. So just opening up areas for camping without facilities is a problem. The shortage of water is also an issue there. We've got a Far North Regional Plan, which is the state plan, which is 13 years old. It's so out of date and it was designed to restrict growth. So we're getting locked in by that each time we try to do something as well. So there's a lot of issues there. I congratulate Libby on that idea that she's done with the camping and stuff. And I've actually got staff looking at that because, you know, it's a possibility of something that we can do, the adopt a worker and, you know, run those campaigns up here, because I know there's a lot of housing here that do have spare rooms. And even if it's a short-term type thing, have a caravan in the driveway, whatever the case may be, to try and fill some of those spots. But, you know, we're pushing very heavily. I've just finished doing delegations with the federal ministers about a regional housing plan on a federal level, because they're the ones that do fund the state. You know, they give the money to the state to do their housing projects, and then the state just are not... I'm trying to think the right word for it. You know, they don't report back to the federal what they're doing with this money. And I believe from a federal level, because this is an Australia-wide issue, this needs to start being pulled into line for regional areas of what and how we're going to deal with this housing issue, with the infrastructure, with the roads, with the water supply, everything as a whole package, and start moving forward and saying, okay, this is the funding, this is where you need to spend it, and working very closely again with the local councils that know where these areas are that need this money spent in housing.
Yeah, and I think what we've seen in the last 18 months, and you've all, I mean, you know, we picked you guys because you've all seen a lot of rapid growth, but I think we've seen in the last 18 months just how quickly these trajectories can change. And you don't see that unless you're on the ground. So and I think there's a long delay sometimes in getting that information back to head office, you know, whether it's in Brisbane or Melbourne or Sydney. And so that, I think, reflects the roles and the important roles that you play in your communities. And Shelley, you would have seen this too. There's some parts of the country that have been going really strongly through COVID. Others have struggled a bit, and it's not always, people aren't always keeping on top of how quickly these changes are going. We're rapidly coming to the end of time. I had just another quick question, and I know it's a cheeky one. James Taylor, would you like to ask it? It is a cheeky one, but I'll just get a sort of a very quick response from each of you on what could be a controversial question, but it is one that I'd just like to put on the table. James, would you like to ask your question?
Hi everybody, James Taylor from the Surf Coast Times here. Hi Libby. An important part of the livability issue for regions that are popular with tourists is managing growth to avoid overcrowding. How far is the Surf Coast Shire Council going to go in limiting the number of people who live in the municipality? Is it prepared to go as far as a population cap like Noosa has?
So I'd just like to get a bit of feedback from all of you on that. I mean, growth does bring challenges, as Michael started that by saying, do want growth, and Libby, you've got that path. But I know that we've had a lot of resistance in some parts of the high growth areas, particularly north coast of New South Wales and southeast part of Queensland. People saying, no more. What are your views about a population cap? Is it a thing that's worth considering, or is it just send us down the wrong path? Libby?
Thanks, Kim, and hi, James, and thanks for that question. I guess something that Surf Coast is really mindful of at the moment is the Distinctive Area Landscapes program that the state government has declared parts of the Surf Coast as distinctive area landscape, and we're awaiting the outcome of what's been a very lengthy process to investigate population and growth, particularly in Torquay, and what those boundaries need to look like. So depending on the outcome of that, we'll have a much clearer picture of what sort of population Surf Coast can cater for. So in response to James's question, it's certainly something that needs to be considered, but I guess it's a difficult thing to assess until we know the state government's decision on those town boundaries. The rest of the coastal communities in the Surf Coast have hard boundaries because they're bordered by national parks. So we're not going to necessarily get expanded housing growth in those coastal communities, but I would imagine that, at the moment, a lot of those communities have, pre-COVID, 30% permanent population and 70% holiday homes. So I anticipate that there won't be a huge amount of population growth in those coastal towns, but there's certainly room for the holiday homes to be converted into more permanent population. So again, I guess it comes back to that population growth being directed towards the hinterland, to places like Winchelsea and Mauriac, which really provide that opportunity for people to enjoy the Surf Coast lifestyle, perhaps not necessarily on the coast, but within a close range of the coast, and still to be able to sort of work from home, commute to Geelong or Melbourne, and a quick drive down to the coast on the weekend. So I would say, just to answer James's question, population numbers I can't see being limited in the short term, but it's probably directing them in the most appropriate areas.
Yeah, good point. Thanks, Libby. Now, Katrina, and then like Mark.
Yeah, and I'll be very quick. Thanks, James. I loved your question. I don't think it's controversial at all. Come to Moree, mate. Come to Moree. We've got space. We have water. We have huge opportunities for employment in all sorts of works of life. We have land that is opened up for building. All we need are some builders and some bricks and some sparkies and some painters, and we can double our number. We are within sight of being able to double our population. So we currently get very close to 10,000. We have the water, we have the area, we have the employment opportunities, and we have the willingness to double our population. So come on up to Moree. We'll welcome you. It'll be great.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Katrina. Lots of business opportunities and investment opportunities. Michael?
Yeah, I don't think I could go as far as that in the sense of doubling our prop. Yeah, for us, one of the reasons I ran for mayor back in 2020, as a councillor, 2016, is we had between 2008 and 2016, 240 rateable properties added to the books.
Wow. That's not many.
It's not many. No. We are currently running at a deficit of around $3 million a year. To sustain a population of what we've got we can't. We have to grow our population at least to the point that we become a sustainable council, and that's all we're after. I don't want to overdevelop the area. It's not a free-for-all to keep on coming and keep on building more houses. I just want to grow enough houses to cater so that the shire itself can become a sustainable shire and hold itself on its rate base. I think that's extremely important. We're a big shire, but most of our shire is locked away in rainforest heritage. So there's not that many areas. We still have a working mill, so we still need sugarcane. We can't take all of that away. So we have to be specific. We've got lots of areas outside Port Douglas. So we've got Keir Beach, we've got Mossman, Myallo, Shannon Vale, that are all areas that can be increased in their housing without hitting the main tourism village itself.
Thank you. And Shelley, just a comment from you. Do you think sort of stopping population growth as an attempt to sort of manage these housing challenges, is that feasible?
I think it is, but I think it's one of those things that's obviously got to be managed, appropriately in the right areas. And I think I find it interesting in Libby's obviously regional location. I think it is what we'll see is that flip from the people really taking their holiday homes and moving them more into sort of permanent residence. I think that will be the change.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's a good point. There is some more movement possible, I think, in some of those, the way those housing options play out. Look, time's against us. I'm sorry I've run a little bit over time today. I'm sorry about that, but thank you very much to the panellists for a very lively and spirited discussion. I think we touched on some really great topics. We will, as I said at the beginning, we'll make a recording of this webinar available on the Regions Rising website, which is regionsrising.regionalaustralia.org.au. So if you want to relive the experience or share it with your friends, please do. You're certainly welcome to keep the conversations going on social media as well. For any of our participants and listeners, if you haven't already, please sign up to our newsletter to get more information on our Regions Rising webinars and in-person events. So just remains for me to thank again our panellists, Shelley Nolan, Katrina Humphries, Libby Stapleton and Michael Kerr. And thanks for all of you participating and putting in questions. And we'll have a great Christmas. We won't have another webinar till early next year, but we'll see you all in February.